Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Williamson. How are you? I am recording this, as I almost always do every Sunday, although the Steelers didn't play today, after the 4 o'clock games, before the late game on Sunday. This one's not super Steelers-centric, though. I do want to talk a little bit of trade deadline stuff. If you don't know, that is 4 o'clock on Tuesday. Also Election Day, by the way. I'm sure you're aware of that. I do think the Steelers are potentially active, but let's talk a little bit of division. What happened today? First, the good news for the Steelers. The Browns are cooked. The Browns are 2-7. They've been outscored now by 65 points this year. And the hype, or the momentum, the acceleration, the jolt that they got by putting Jameis Winston in is over. And they got abused by the Chargers today. So I'm talking about these three teams as well as Washington, because that's 7 of the Steelers' remaining 9 games. You know, where are these teams? The offense got destroyed by a very good Chargers defense. And the defense hung around, but Herbert was phenomenal in this game. I really think if they weren't already, and they were, that the Browns are going to become major sellers. Maybe Nick Chubb, some defensive pieces, maybe even an offensive lineman. So my hunch, and I don't have a crystal ball, is when the Steelers see the Browns going forward, they're going to be in a state of disrepair, to say the least. You know, and I thought even after last week, I'm like, ooh, maybe the 2 times the Steelers play the Browns going forward are going to be harder than Watson. And maybe that's still true because Watson's that bad. But the Browns are cooked. I would imagine the coaching seat heats up. You know, trades are possibly in order. All that bad stuff for the organization. And frankly, they're in one of the worst shapes of any organization in the league, big picture. Now the Bengals, that's a lot different. Burrow threw 5 touchdown passes even without T. Higgins. Their defense has been really bad this year, but if you look over the last month, it's gotten noticeably better, led by Hendricks, the great edge rusher. The sleeping giant, I fear, is starting to awake. They are now 4-5. I think there's a really good chance that Cincinnati is heavily involved in one of those 7 positions in the AFC. I think the Chargers are as well, who I just mentioned beat the Browns. Now, trust me, beating the Raiders, who are horrific, isn't a huge feather in the cap, and the Raiders suffered a bunch of injuries in this game. That being said, you know, you're starting to string wins together. You have a dynamite quarterback. Everyone's talking about Lamar, rightfully so. We'll get to him in a minute. But Burrow has absolutely been a top 3 or 4 quarterback in this league all year. He's been really, really good. So they are a sleeping giant. And as good as Russell Wilson is and looks, and I'm encouraged about, the Steelers definitely have a quarterback disadvantage against the other 2 potential contenders in the division. As for the Ravens, Lamar was phenomenal. I think he had a perfect passer rating. I don't think that's the best indicator in the world, but you get the drift. That's still pretty good. Zay Flowers was tremendous. They got up early on Denver and then pretty much squashed them out. You know, they're a really good team. They're going to really regret their Raider losses, as well as losing last week to Cleveland. Probably just the wrong time to get the Browns, a division team. So Baltimore's very much for real. They're the only team in the division I would power rank over the Steelers right now. But this was their formula. A lot of running. Zay Flowers, slowly incorporate Deontay. Defense was better. Now, Denver's offense isn't the best one out there to exploit poor pass defenses. Don't get me wrong. But I also think they might not be done in terms of trade deadline stuff. I mean, I think that the Ravens could be after a pass rusher, Jadeveon Clowney, maybe bring him back, maybe a cover guy, something along those lines. Now, that being said, there was nothing that could happen today, this week, that could knock the Steelers out of first place. Steelers are 6-2. Ravens are 6-3. Bengals are 4-6. Browns are 2-7. And of course, all 6 of the division games are still in play for Pittsburgh. And they usually do well in the division and know this division. And I bet they at least go 500 in the division, if not better, considering where Cleveland's at. As importantly, if it comes down to wild card stuff, the Steelers only have 1 conference loss. Of course, they don't have a division loss. They haven't played yet. Every other team in the division is 1-1 in the division. Steelers are 0-0. But in the conference, the Steelers only have 1 loss, but everyone else in the division has 3. The Browns don't matter, but the Ravens and Bengals each have 3 conference losses, which is a very high tiebreaker, of course. So Steelers are still in really good shape, but the Ravens we know were going to be a challenge always. And I was kind of hoping the Bengals would shoot themselves in the foot over those last couple of weeks, but I think it's going quite the opposite way. I want to talk about Washington here in a little bit too, because again, they played an interesting game against the opponent the Steelers just faced. First, I want to tell you about this episode being brought to you by Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. From the NFL to college, Bet Online is every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game is over, head over to the online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of over 150 slot games. Head to the website today and use promo code BELIEVE and get in on the action. Bet Online. The game starts here. So, coincidentally, the team the Steelers are about to play, Washington, played the team the Steelers just played, the Giants. And some interesting trends. It's one game, and I didn't study every snap, but I had it on its own screen today. Jaden Daniels, his numbers weren't phenomenal, but he was so poised and very, very impressive, as was Washington's offensive line. Washington's offensive line stymied that great Giants pass rush, and the Giants just kept bringing pressure and blitzes, and it didn't get home, and they had a real hard time stopping Washington's running game, even without their best runner, Brian Robinson. I don't know if he'll play or not this week, something to monitor, but they mixed it up between 3 or 4 ball carriers, including Daniels, and were pretty impressive. I mean, they controlled the majority of this game. But I also was kind of impressed with the Giants, that the Giants are not an easy team to play against. They're not a bottom tier team. I'm not saying that they're an above average team, but Daniel Jones played really well. And much like the Giants did against the Steelers, they kind of ran all over the Commanders. So I think that is positive from a Pittsburgh perspective. They're going to try to come out and run the ball a lot against Washington. And personnel wise, Washington's not that impressive. They're 2 defensive tackles. Newton, the rookie, and Payne are really good. Wagner, they're good at the linebacker position. Luvu and Wagner. Chin, the big safety, is also a good player up the middle. So the spine of the defense is pretty good, even with Allen out. But the Giants, who we just saw, had plenty of success against them too. This was not a blowout type of game. Last thing I want to talk about today is a little bit of trade deadline stuff. I'm running out of ideas, to be honest with you. Adam Schefter reported since we talked last that there was basically a deal in place for Christian Kirk. That's a name I've brought up to you many times. And then he gets hurt. And it just seems like everything the Steelers do on the wide receiver market goes that way. Okay, it's just setting up perfect, and then somebody gets hurt or something weird happens. So you can't do that. I mean, that's a huge problem. Now, I don't know that they absolutely have to make a deal at wide receiver, because I can't see Mike Williams and Thielen and those guys are fine, but they're not going to move the needle for you. The the names that I can come up with, and I was going to even throw this one out there, also get thrown away. I mean, the Saints are in such a bad position right now that I thought maybe you could pry Olave away. Maybe. I don't feel great about that now. He just got really, really injured. That, of course, isn't going to happen. I mean, he's in the hospital. Right? It sounds like he's all right, but he went to the hospital today. I thought maybe things would go so poorly for the Jets. You could get Olave's drafty and Ohio State buddy Garrett Wilson away. I mean, again, these are names you'd have to give a lot for, and I'm not sure I'd even be interested in that if it's like 2 first-round picks. But I was just looking, what if we changed our tune and just aimed really high? And what it comes down to really is, I think Slayton's like the only real answer that would help, be cost effective. Maybe Tyler Lockett. Metcalf's due back soon. Smith-Njigba's had a really big day and is promising. The Russell Wilson connection. Seattle's still in the hunt. They're hovering around 500, but they also have massive cap problems next year. Might they just want to get out of an older player's deal? And I know he doesn't sound like much, but they're high on Bobo. He could be their third receiver. He's okay. So the receiver, unless I'm missing something, I've been digging through this like crazy. I just don't have a lot of great ideas. Would you be interested in some of these teams' full-time fire sale? Like, I think you could get pretty much any Saint you want. Lattimore's on the market. Maybe, make a defensive strength even more of a strength. You know what I mean? If it's not that cost effective, not that much of a draft pick compensation. I would love to add a defensive tackle. Somebody that's with some run stuffing prowess, more nose. And I don't have a lot of names for that, but I bet you could dig up some. Would you be interested in a slot corner? Would you be interested in any O-line depth? There's not a lot of that stuff out there, but it doesn't mean you have to only get a receiver and nothing else, I guess is where I'm going with that. So we'll see. Weird podcast for me on a Sunday because Steelers didn't play. But we did kind of dig into 7 of the 9 opponents, including really breaking down the division. And trade deadline is soon. I will wait until Tuesday night to do one, just so we know that it passes. Probably do one podcast in between. Maybe I'll do some general midseason thoughts, or if a trade does happen, obviously quickly react to that. But that's a wrap. Follow me on Twitter @WilliamsonNFL, and over and out. See ya.